By the end of this video, you'll know how to use these 3 types of Lua loops, and you'll be able to use them in your Roblox game. Let's get started. Let's start with the while loop. This loop has 3 components: the while keyword, the condition that follows it, and the instructions between do and end, which is the code. In this loop here, the condition is always true, so the code will execute infinitely. To prevent the output from being flooded with hundreds and hundreds of prints, you typically include a task.wait, which introduces a small delay between each execution. Now we're going to use this loop to change a part's color to a random color indefinitely. We name the part, and inside the loop we change its color to a new RGB color. Now we're going to assign a random value between 0 and 255 to each RGB parameter. If we run the game, we see that it changes color every second without stopping. Now we're going to make it stop after 4 seconds. To do that, we'll create a value that will be specified in the second parameter. In this way, the loop only runs as long as the value is true. And we're going to spawn a function before the loop that makes the value false after 4 seconds. Let's see. Alright. Let's move on to the second loop, which is the numeric for loop. This loop has several components. The first is the keyword, which starts the loop. Then there's the index, where you can put any letter or word you want. This index is the value that changes with each iteration. Now we have to set it equal to a value, the initial value. Next comes another value, which is the final value. And finally, it's the value by which the index increases with each iteration. Although you don't need to specify it because the default is 1. Now, let's say that for each loop iteration I want it to print I. If we check the output, we can see that all the values from 1 to 10 have been printed. 10 cycles have been run. This is very useful for creating counters. This typing effect, which I have taken from one of my videos, hobbies of this kind, and thousands of other things. For example, I'm going to make a counter. When I click on this part, there will be a 5-second countdown, and the part will disappear. To do this, I need to put a click detector inside the part and create some text on the screen. Now I'm going to reference them in my script and connect the player's click to a function. Inside this function, I'm going to put the for loop. This way, with each loop, the count decreases until it reaches 0, and the text constantly displays the count's value. And when the count reaches 0, the loop ends and the code below is executed. By the way, don't forget about this wait right here. If we test it, the script we've written works perfectly. Now we're going to move on to the last loop, the generic for loop. This loop is used to iterate over tables of values. So first I'll have to explain a bit about what a table is. A table is nothing more than a container into which you can put values, and these values, of course, have their own value. They also have an index or position within the table. In this case, I have a table with a name, a Boolean value, and a numeric value. And now I'm going to open a for loop to iterate over this table. First, I'll put for, then the index, which refers to the index of the next value, v. And finally, we'll specify the table. There are 2 ways, with pairs and with iPairs. Pairs iterates through the table in no particular order, whereas iPairs iterates through it in numerical order, which is very useful for sorted lists. I'm going to do it with pairs because it doesn't matter right now. I'm going to print the index and v. In the output, we can see how it has printed the 3 values along with their indices. Now I'm going to do something very useful. I'm going to count the number of instances of a specific class that a container holds. For this example, I've created a frame that contains all of these things. Now in our main script, we're going to reference the frame and create a variable called count, which will help us count the number of text buttons we find. Let's write the for loop as I've shown you. Since there's no specific order, we'll use pairs, and I suppose you're wondering, how am I going to access a frame if it's not a table but an instance? Don't worry, we're going to use this method called getChildren, which returns a table with all the instances children, but be careful, it only returns the direct children. To search among descendants, you use getDescendants. Okay, now, to classify, we're going to write a conditional. Here we use this method, isA. This method evaluates whether the is of a class. In this case, I'm looking for all text buttons, so I put text button. Now, for each text button we find, we'll add 1 to the count. And finally, we print the count. The output tells us that there are 9. That's correct, there are 9.
Thanks for sticking around until the end. I hope you now understand how loops work in Lua. Don't forget to support me.